Martin, you touched just a moment ago about the semiconductor crisis during the COVID-19. When you were at Volvo, you navigated this crisis in a really particular and pretty robust supply chain strategy. Can you take us through the strategies that you implemented at that time that not only helped the company achieve profits, but did so despite reduced production?
Yeah, it was an incredible period, not least because we'd just come out of the COVID crisis, which was absolutely significant, but in a way controlled because COVID was sort of sweeping around the globe in a wave from Asia to the West. And you had blocks of continents, countries, and industries shutting down all at the same time. So everything was stopping at once in a sequence. So that was a disruption. The semiconductor crisis was something else. It was obviously created by the COVID pandemic, as the mothballing of a lot of the semiconductor facilities meant that they'd fallen far behind on their capability to produce. But every single week it was different semiconductors that we were short of. And the combinations of semiconductors in a car is thousands and thousands in all the different aspects of the car. A car is effectively a software machine now. Even the control of your seat through to this infotainment system is all software. And there are millions of combination of end items in a car based on the different spec of a different vehicle. So the complexity is immense. So we were having a situation where every week we were having to cut a significant proportion of our weekly production. And this is where supply chain being responsible for the planning process is so crucial. So we were taking the information on what semiconductors were available every week, and actually every single week determining which cars we could build in our global factories. And so we had all the models, all the factories, and we had a set of rules as to what we wanted to achieve for the business. So the priorities were mixed. I probably shouldn't give away what they were for Volvo cars, but let's just say we were pushing an EV strategy and a market share on EVs. We had certain models which were our highest profitability models with the best market share in a segment. And we had a set of rules which basically each week when we got the supply, we were having to crunch into: this is the best way to run the factories, this is the best way of satisfying the customer order bank, and this is the best way of actually optimizing profitability and cash flow. So the thousands of pieces of information that we were working on all week, every week, to do that was incredible. And I think we had clear rules. We were steering the conversation. We were managing the expectations of the factory. We were managing the expectations of the commercial group. We were having to change the customer output on a week-by-week basis, and actually managed to upsell the best spec of cars down the best sales channels to protect profitability. So it was an incredible period. One thing I would say, I went to a Gartner convention last week about planning, and I realised we were doing all that on brute force and spreadsheets. These days, an AI system would do it like this.
Yes.
This point on demand and the customer and agility, I think that's a new dynamic that the car industry needs to face. And I think this situation we've faced in the last few years has exemplified it. So if you think the car industry, very expensive product, very expensive supply chain, very expensive manufacturing system. So it's all been about minimizing the cost of that process rather than being agile to the customer. So the car industry's tactic since the days of Henry T. Ford has been: you build these huge assets, you fill them up, you maximize the production because in theory you sweat the assets, send the cars out, you can have whatever you want as long as it's black, to go back to the Henry T. Ford thing. And then you have dealers who are persuading the customers to buy the cars that you've given them. So it's a very strange business model. And I think the car industry moving towards a brand, demand, consumer-led agility is the major challenge for supply chains moving forward. And I remember I was at an automotive logistics convention about 2019, and I was one of the people on a panel, and we'd said how brilliant we were now at planning and demand forecasting. And an industry journalist stood up and said, "You're useless, you're decades behind." And I think, and I'm going to try and remember this example from 5 years ago, so I'm getting old, my mind probably not so good anymore. But he said something along the lines of, Amazon, for example, have algorithms where if Lucy goes on the internet and searches for a pink teddy bear, the algorithm will say, we now need to stock all of these additional products in our UK warehouses, because it was working out by one person searching for a pink teddy bear the algorithm extrapolated up into this is a sign of some sort of trend or zeitgeist. And I think the car industry, we are still in that flip period of, well, these are the cars we're offering. This is what we expect to build. Surely the customers are going to buy them. But that sort of personalization and reacting to consumers who become more challenging because let's face it, the actual offering's increasing. All these Chinese EV companies that are putting cars into the market,
Yeah.
so many new startup brands then fighting for that space because they're very expensive products. We need to earn the right to get our customers to buy our cars. So again, it's another reason why using data and AI and intelligence and making the supply chain agile to the consumer, I think that's really is the existential challenge for the car industry right now.